Hi, good morning, everyone. I have a little background noise right now. I hope it's not too annoying. There's a leaf blower outside. It shouldn't be much longer. So thank you all for your understanding. I'd like to go ahead and call the Enforcement Investigation and Intervention Committee meeting to order. Today is July 16th, 2024, and it's 9 o'clock. We'll go ahead and take roll. So Tricia Wynn is here, Allison Cormack,
Present.
and David Lawler.
Present.
Great. Okay, we have everybody that we need. I'm going to call on Loretta Melby, who is our executive officer.
Thank you. I am Loretta Melby, or Lori. I'm the board's executive officer. We do have Reza Pejvesh, our legal counsel, here as well. I am requesting that we reorder the agenda and take item 2.0 public comment for items not on the agenda after 6.0 prior to adjourning. And I'll share my reason for that ask. One, this is the second time we've had this meeting agendaized and scheduled, so I would really hope that we can get through some of these agenda items to allow for us to do some of the work to help everybody that shared a lot of the stuff in public comment. But what I've noticed at the last meetings and stuff is that after agenda items have been shared, there may be more information that the public might want to share. So at that point, if we did public comment for items not on the agenda at the end, then they can request information that maybe was not covered in items 3, 4, 5, and 6. And give them an opportunity to kind of wrap up anything with some final comments or something that maybe wasn't covered in one of the agenda items. So if you could consider that, Chair Wynn, that is my request for today.
I am very willing to go along with that. I would very much like to get to the items on our agenda, and I also am really consider public comment to be valuable in our process. So is this something that we take a vote on, or is this something that I consent to, or how should we proceed? Reza,
as the chair, you are able to reorder.
Yeah, I think you have the discretion, Tricia, and if the other board members have a different view or thoughts, they can certainly express them. But otherwise, it's up to you.
Board members Cormack or Lawler, are you comfortable with us doing that?
That's fine.
I am comfortable specifically because it's for items not on the agenda.
Right.
So we will have ample time for public comment on each of the agenda items. And then at the end of the day, however long this takes, we will have an opportunity for people to share other thoughts that we can consider agendizing for the future. I think, frankly, that's really actually a pretty good order.
Good, thanks very much. Yeah, because I really do want to give the public opportunity to speak on the items we really need to get through today. And however long it takes, Allison, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, but we do have a hard stop at 5. And I do expect that we'll go most of the day. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to go ahead and move to item 3, which is a review and approval of the minutes. Now, we have an almost completely different committee at this point. David was on the committee in October, but was unable to attend. Our other members who were at the committee are not here today. I have reviewed the minutes and do believe that they accurately reflect the business that was taken that day. So I'm very comfortable making a motion to approve the previous meeting minutes. But with you two, it's almost a leap of faith on whether or not you feel comfortable voting for minutes on meetings that you were not able to attend.
I'm comfortable. I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Any comments?
I'll just say that I'm going to go ahead and abstain. I had discussed this with Reza, and that is my practice. If my vote had been required, I would have gone back and watched the meeting to confirm its accuracy. But given that it will pass without me, I will abstain.
Thanks very much, Board Member Cormack, and thank you, Board Member Lawler. So we have a motion and a second, and so I'd like to open for public comment on this item, whether or not the meeting minutes are accurate. Board Moderator, would you please take us to public comment?
We will
Board
be
moderator,
opening-
you're taking us to public comment. I just want to remind everybody that these are minutes from 2 years ago. So just so you guys are 100% aware, if you were present 2 years ago and want to make comment on the meeting minutes from 2 years ago, you absolutely can. But that these are not minutes from any of the previous board meetings that we have had recently that discussed these items that are pretty hot topics. Thank you.
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in the request for a comment. I've activated this question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Nguyen, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. Do we have any public requests for comments there in Sacramento?
So Trisha, you would not know that, but Sacramento Public, hopefully someone can chime in from there.
Thank you.
We do not.
Thank you. Committee
We do
Chair
not have
Nguyen,
requests for public comments.
Thank you. Committee Chair Nguyen, would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Mark, thanks very much. So we'll go to a vote on this motion. Nguyen, aye. Lawler
Yes.
and Cormac.
Abstain.
Great, thank you very much. Those minutes are approved. So we are now going to move to our first information item, which is the overview and comparison of the intervention program and probation. So I'm going to turn it over to Shannon. Take it away.
Good morning. I'm Shannon Johnson. I'm the Board's Enforcement Division Chief, and I'm going to be presenting item 4.0 and 5.0. Again, as we go through the slides, statute, regulation, and uniform standards pertaining to items will be notated at the bottom for the ones I've identified. So agenda item 4.0 is going to be the overview and comparison of the intervention program and probation. Next, so there were additional questions regarding intervention and probation. I had reviewed this a couple board meetings back. So I took the original slides because there were some comments on it. I elaborated a bit. So now this is the next 3 slides are going to be kind of a side-by-side comparison of the two. One of the questions back in May was, why do RNs choose intervention over probation? A couple reasons could be for choosing intervention would be confidentiality of the intervention program. For probation, the decision and order, as well as the accusation, are posted on both the board's website and nurses. Intervention does not have any public notice once it's been completed successfully. And that meaning that any complaint that has been filed before or during the program will not be used in the disciplinary case by the board if they complete successfully in intervention. This does change if they're terminated from the program for any reason other than successful completion. If they are terminated or withdraw, the case is sent to enforcement to proceed with disciplinary action against the license. The other reason is maybe the unknown of potential outcome from a hearing and possible stress testifying. So going through the disciplinary process is it's a long process, not longer than intervention possibly, but it could be stressful, and the unknown of what the outcome of that hearing would be. So getting into the table, so currently we have 241 intervention participants. That includes participants and individuals, applicants to the program. So they're still waiting to be accepted by the IEC into the program. We have 640 active in-state probationers. 294 of those probationers have a chemical dependency or have chemical dependency conditions within their decision and order. A cease practice can be implemented for both intervention and probation based on uniform standard violations and consequences, as well as disciplinary guidelines for probation. The license needs to be placed in an inactive status by the intervention participant, but the probationer is required to keep their license active at all times. A license suspension is ordered in a disciplinary action and is usually applied in order to get the mental health and physical exams completed to ensure fitness for duty. That's in the probationary side. Both intervention and probation have reporting requirements. Intervention is upon recommendation of the IEC, and probation is based on disciplinary guidelines. Modifications can be implemented for intervention once the IEC reviews and makes the recommendation for the amended care plan. Probation is a formal petition process. It's 1 year from the effective date of the probation. They can petition for modifications of probation. Early termination is not an option in intervention. Uniform Standard states that the requirements for completion or dictate the requirements for completion. For probation, this is a formal petition process. So 2 years from the effective date of the probation period, they are able to petition the board for early termination of probation. Cost recovery is only ordered in a disciplinary matter, so therefore it will not apply to intervention unless they are terminated from the program or they leave the program for any other reason other than successful completion. Discipline is pursued, and then there is a disciplinary outcome. Cost recovery will be applied in that disciplinary proceeding. There is an administrative fee for intervention. The board pays these fees directly to Maximus per participant per month. There is no administrative fee for probation. Next slide. Both intervention and probation need to have initial exams completed. Both intervention and probation follow uniform standards. Probation must also follow the conditions within the disciplinary order. Treatment recommendations should be included in the exam results for both. Intervention will have the participant before an IEC for review of the exam and acceptance into the program. Therapy requirements are from the exams as well and implemented in probation, but goes before the IEC for recommendation and then approval by the board for intervention. Drug testing is required for both intervention and probation, and uniform standards are applied for both as well. Nurse support group is required for both, and the fees are determined by the facilitator. The fees are the same for both the probationer and intervention. The nurse support group facilitator may have a sliding scale for payment, and however, payment cannot be grounds to deny meeting attendance for either intervention or probation. Community groups are required for both. The IEC recommends the group frequency, and the disciplinary guidelines determine the frequency for probation. The intervention program requires a sponsor or equivalent. Probation does not require a sponsor. Employment for probation is mandated through the decision and order and must comply with, at minimum, 6 consecutive months at no less than 24 hours per week. For intervention, the employment requirement is recommended by the IEC and approved by the board. If they are not found safe to practice, an additional assessment will be required before returning a participant or probationer to work. Once the level of employment is approved by the board, the CCM, the clinical case manager at Maximus, can approve employment logistics, ensuring that they meet the requirement that was approved by the IEC. The probationer must adhere to the supervision set on the employment approval letter, which is maximum, moderate, and minimum supervision levels. Maximum is that they have to be with their worksite monitor at all times during their shift. Moderate, they have to be with their worksite monitor half of their shift. Minimum, they have to check in once per shift with their worksite monitor. For intervention, the level of supervision is recommended by IEC, but per uniform standards, at minimum, it's one-time meeting with the worksite monitor per week. Employment limitations are detailed within the decision and order for a probationer. The employment limitations for a participant is recommended by the IEC and approved by the board. Both intervention and probation have reporting requirements. For probation, it is detailed in the disciplinary guidelines, and intervention is recommended by the IEC and approved by the board. Courses may be assigned for both probation and intervention. I have not seen courses recently in the last several months for intervention. However, courses for a probationer may include, especially the ones that are non-CD related, if it's practice related, whatever the violation was that occurred is how they apply the courses that are recommended by the nurse consultant that reviews the case. The next slide is the same slide I shared at the last board meeting to put it back in. So what it is, it's the cost per calendar year for a participant for testing. And so these costs or this report came from Vault, and these amounts were pulled from that report. And it is the average amount that a participant will pay in a year, the lowest amount per. So we pulled the lowest paying participant and then the highest paying participant for those years to show that as well. So that is what this slide is representing. And if there's any questions on testing, we will have both Maximus and a representative from Vault, our testing vendor, here today this afternoon to discuss that portion of it. And that is it for 4.0.
Thank you very much.
Real quick, I just wanted to let Shannon know that Jaspreet, your co-office partner, keeps showing up on the camera. So I just wanted to
on the
make sure
side.
people knew, you know, that she was there and present. There she is. And that it's not somebody that's not supposed to be next to you, and that she is there to help to participate and answer any questions. And she is now fully in view for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shannon, and thank you, Lori, for that. I have, a number of questions. So the board members are much more familiar with probation than they are with an intervention because we read cases, almost daily on probation. So we're all kind of fairly familiar with what happens when someone relapses, when they don't check in, when they haven't completed coursework, when they're having problems with employment. So that makes I understand that kind of inside and out. The intervention program, it is a little bit harder. Of course, it's confidential. And I do see advantages, disadvantages to each, whether you do the intervention program or whether you do probation. But what I'm wondering is this explained, are these differences explained to nurses? I mean, I know some people do a self-referral, go immediately into treatment. There've never been a blip on our screen. So, we don't see them, but I'm just wondering, one program is definitely going to benefit one person more than another will. And I'm just wondering, how does that get explained to nurses?
I can't speak for Maximus necessarily, but they can contact us a couple different ways. So if they contact us directly, our intervention staff at BRN, we do explain the differences between the two. However, if they contact going through Maximus, that should be shared with them, but I'm not sure as to the extent that the disciplinary side is explained to the participant or to the RN that is requesting to apply to go into the program. And just stating too, Tricia, so later today, Virginia Matthews from Maximus will be here if you may want to pose that question.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for them.
Thank you. Well, the other thing that I see in these probationary cases is how valuable the probation monitor is. I mean, it seems like people who are really successful on probation are people who are doing everything right, keeping in really close contact with the probation monitor. I mean, the probation monitor really understands their cases and actually can talk about them at, you know, any hearing or in the stipulated, you know, settlements and stuff like that. I'm wondering, you know, and I keep hearing that the caseworkers maybe because of turnover, a variety of reasons, maybe people in the intervention program don't have that same kind of relationship. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, Shannon.
Well, the participants, when they are applying, up until they are accepted into the IEC, they have a check-in one time per week with their clinical case manager. And then prior to that, the clinical case manager does an interview with that participant to go over all of their history and everything. And then once they're accepted to the IEC, they have a check-in with their clinical case manager one time per month moving forward, unless that is changed by an IEC recommendation. I have seen where IECs have recommended that they check in more than one time per month. And during that conversation, it should include, you know, how they're doing in their program, any recovery therapy that they're doing, medications. It needs to cover employment, you know, where they're at in their program. So there's a list of things that they cover when they do that check-in. And for probation, initially we do an orientation, and they go through every single condition with the probationer to ensure that they understand each condition of probation and what is expected of them. And then we check in with them as needed moving forward. We also do quarterly reviews and audits of every case file to ensure that we have all the documentation necessary from worksite monitors, from nurse support group facilitators, from any physician for medication management, exams, et cetera. So we do communicate on both sides. And again, Virginia Matthews from Maximus will be here and could elaborate maybe on and I believe she's going to cover turnover and all of that in her presentation as well.
So Ginny is in the attendees, and if we can get her elevated, that would be fantastic, board moderator.
Yeah, and if she wanted to comment on that, I mean, it seems like this would be an appropriate time, but anyway, I'd like to also ask other committee members if they have questions or comments at this time. Yeah, go ahead, Board Member Cormack.
Thank you, Chair Wynn, and thank you, Ms. Johnson, for laying this all out. I agree with Chair Wynn that our lack of familiarity with the way that the intervention program is structured is I think we've caught up, but it took a little while hearing more and having this information shared. I just want to go back to what Chair Wynn started, the sort of fork in the road when a nurse makes a decision about which of these programs to participate in. I understand your answer, but I feel like there's probably more information we could provide to help nurses decide. Even this level of information, these slides are very helpful to understanding what are the components of each program and what are pluses and minuses. We've heard a lot of public comment about the costs of intervention, but I just want to say, I just wrote this down. I'm like, both of these programs are intensive with significant restrictions and expectations. And that, I think, is sort of the headline that if a nurse has, is found in a disciplinary process to have had unprofessional conduct, regardless of the area of that conduct occurring, and or if a nurse feels that they would benefit from intensive treatment, like this is a big deal. These are multi-year programs that are extremely expensive, restrictive, and we expect a lot. I'll just echo what Chair Wynn said. When someone successfully completes probation, or when we see that they request early termination because they really have done absolutely everything, I'm happy to see that the program working as intended. But it is quite restrictive, and it's not, as we go through these, it's not markedly different in terms of the overall intent. Some of the differences are important, and I guess the question I would have related to that is, in addition to like who helps the nurse decide, like, do we as a board have a philosophy about which kinds of nurses and which kinds of infractions, I'll say, are best suited to one or other? And if we do have that philosophy, how do we share that to help nurses make this important decision when they're scared and in crisis?
This is Reza. Sorry, I just wanted to quickly chime in with my own thoughts. I hear board members Cormac and Wynn with some good insight regarding assisting the licensees to kind of differentiate between the programs, and I think it's important, worthwhile to ensure that they understand, the uniqueness of the intervention program versus probation. But just I wanted to insert a little caveat, just a word of caution, that I have some slight concern, just that we need to stay very clear. I think we can do what you're kind of suggesting, but also importantly, stay clear, pretty wide clear of anything along the lines of board staff suggesting or being in a position where they're asked to suggest which way a licensee should go. It's of course, an important decision, a difficult decision, and one that would certainly benefit from having all the information and things. But I do have some concern about staff being in a position of, even being asked, which way should I go? What do you think based on my case? What do you see? Intervention is going to be better for me, or probation? Because you're then kind of directing licensees regarding their legal status, their case, things like that. That's just a little caveat I wanted to insert in there. Again, not mutually exclusive at all with what you were suggesting.
Of course, that was not where I was headed. I'm all about just sharing the information, even just, on a website, having trouble, thinking about, just the information, because we're certainly hearing, and we see that even in probation. We see some people saying like, I didn't really understand some of, these restrictions, and I'm, so, okay, anyway, sorry, it looked like EO Melby was going to respond.
Thank you. Yes, we do have a lot of information on our website. If you go to the search bar, there's intervention across the top on the homepage. There's intervention link. There are videos with participants speaking. There is information presented by board staff on probation, different laws, intervention as well. We have flyers that we send out to various organizations, various hospital settings. Maximus does presentations as part of the contract to anybody that asks on that about the intervention program. And the intervention program is specifically set up to aid in rehabilitation, both for substance use disorder as well as mental health. And that is really the goal. There is fee breakdowns on the website as well, goals and objectives, program history, how to enroll, how to get involved, any additional information. It goes through it in depth. And so the information is there. We are also aware of various legal counsels out there, various healthcare organizations out there that know about the intervention program and will offer that up in consultation to people, licensees that they're either been referred to because a complaint has come in, or the healthcare facility has noticed that there is an issue and they may recommend the BRN's intervention program. Because they were aware of it because of some presentation that Maximus did, or that board staff has participated in. So there are many avenues to get to the intervention program, and a lot of information out on there. We can obviously always improve. And so if we hear that there is specific information that probably needs to be made more clear, then we can always focus on those improvements and get that out to you there. But I really think it'd be great right now to allow Maximus, Ginny, to speak up just a little bit here on what happens when they do a direct call to them for help. And if there is some great information and about your presentations that you put out to kind of share what the intervention program is.
Yeah, yes, go ahead. And then we'll go back to Board Member Lawler if he has questions or comments. Or I don't know if you finished, Board Member Cormack.
I'll just have one more when we're done with this.
Thank you very much. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Matthews.
Good morning. Yeah, I would agree with everything that's been said so far. I think I would add that we also at Maximus have a website, and it parallels much of what the BRN website talks about in the intervention program, and then we add to it, and they link to each other. We have resources on our website as well, and the intervention program is more focused, I would say, on the recovery aspects as opposed to probation. We really have taken a more recovery approach, but that's what we're about. That was the purpose of the program when it was started back in 1985. So, I would say that there are resources on our website also that point people in that direction and help them to find resources for recovery. Then that's open to anyone. And so it would be the general public as well as probationers or anyone in our program. But when people come into our program are asking about our program, if we don't know the answers, we refer them back to the analysts at the intervention program and have them speak with any of the analysts working in intervention about the differences, because our case managers don't necessarily feel like they have a complete set of answers because we haven't worked in that side of things, but talk about how our program works, and we'll give them the full picture. We would never tell them what's best for them. So Reza, we agree. That's not something that we're comfortable doing, and we would never give them advice on which way to go, but we can tell them what the options mean for them. So we talk about what the recovery program is about, what intervention's about, and then refer them back to look at the differences. We do talk about the confidentiality of our program and the fact that the intervention program is, it remains confidential on their record, and that the probation program remains on their record for many years. So those are the kinds of things that we talk with them about.
Thank you very much, Ginny. I appreciate that. So
Sure.
we'll go back to Board Member Cormack, and then we'll go to Board Member Lawler. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair Wynn. I just want to be, crystal clear on the costs, because these are expensive programs and the vast majority of the costs are paid by the nurse in either intervention or probation. And it seems to me that the biggest components of the cost are the treatment, the therapy, and the drug testing. Does staff agree that those are the three largest components? Okay. And in both of those, as I look at the slides, those are required. So again, now I think we should be really clear. You mentioned there are 640 probationers, 294 have the chemical dependency terms, so almost half, I guess. So for those people, drug testing is required. And I think treatment also, and therapy, yes, right, because it's 1 to 19. So in those, from a cost standpoint, I just want someone on staff to confirm that whether you are in the probation program or intervention, if you have a chemical dependency issue, you will be paying these significant costs for treatment, therapy, and drug testing. Shannon, I couldn't hear you.
You're muted, Shannon. There we go.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, I just had to wait for it to unmute. Yes, for both probation and intervention, they will be paying out of pocket. For intervention, their initial exam, they do not pay for, but then from what we had heard last meeting, anything over 50 that Maximus provides, the intervention participant is paying out of pocket for per test, but it's, or excuse me, not per test, per exam. However, all the testing, whether it be probation or intervention, they follow the same guidelines and uniform standard for the level of testing that they're at. Even though that previous slide I showed you was for intervention, not for probation, it would be very similar because the first year they have the same level, the second year same level, and the same exceptions. So those were going to be very similar, but yes, they do both pay out of pocket, and it is the most costly in those areas.
Okay. Today is probably not the day, but I'm sure staff has heard that just, I think some sort of comparison document I am trying to find on, the BRN website. I just searched probation or intervention or probation, and I think it's possible that we could have, maybe some central page or document that says, here's a general overview and here are the links to all the places, rather than someone trying to find it. So if that already exists, great. It just wasn't easy for me to find it, and I don't want to take any more time from the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
I just want to.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but can I just comment on that really quick? So we are in the process of creating the PowerPoint slides to do a video for our website for probation, as well as revamp the whole probationary side of the website. And we're going to include a lot of this, and very similar to the 3 slides as well. So it's kind of like what to expect if you're going into probation. We already have the intervention side, so that's a piece we are missing, and we are working on it currently.
Glad to hear it.
Good, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Lawler.
Thank you. I only have 2 questions. And the first addresses what Board Member Cormack was just talking about, dealing with cost. Your slide, well, let me go back. The PowerPoint that you are in the process of creating, where it will include the costs of intervention versus probation, I wonder if there's a way to find a range of the costs that you did not include yet on the slide you showed us today. I don't believe today's slide was meant to be misleading, but unless these are just rare exceptions we heard about in public comment at the last board meetings, it sounds as if the licensees in intervention are actually paying 2 to 3 times more, at least, annually because of these tests, exams, and treatments than we see in that slide. Does that make sense? When they say 7,000 a year, 17,000 a year, as opposed to 3,000 a year. So it would be nice to know what the range is, because the reality I understand is there's nothing you can do about that, and certainly we can't do about that. But with such a prohibitive cost, it'd be nice to know in advance what they're walking into. My actual question, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we can provide a kind of an average maybe. And again, the probation side is going to be just the same. And initially, those numbers we thought were just what is paid to Vault and not the collection sites. And that's why they were low. But I was recently told that no, that number, those costs incorporate both Vault and the collection site cost. But again, I only put in their intervention, so I can also provide eventually the slide for probation to look at maybe only probation and intervention and see kind of a comparison at a future meeting.
Thank you. Throughout the tables in these slides you showed us, there were multiple areas where the IEC has the authority to make recommendations in the intervention program. And I don't know if this is a question for you or Ms. Matthews, but is there, outside of us as the board, another group or person that holds the IEC accountable or has oversight or supervision on the IEC to see the kinds of decisions that they're recommending? And the reason I ask is because it seemed in our last meetings that some of those IEC decisions that they were recommending were not reasonable, or at least lacked common sense, if that makes sense. Is there any other group looking over them besides us as a board?
No, it's the program manager, and so I myself and also our assistant executive officer has been involved in the IEC meetings for quite some time now to address anything that comes up during the meetings to ensure that they're following the uniform standards and any statute and regulations in order to proceed with the participants. There's no other organization that they report to, the IECs report to, or that they obtain information from other than they should be making their recommendations based on documentation provided from that participant's overseeing physician, exams, medication management, et cetera, and from their treatment program. They also, Maximus receives input from nurse support group facilitators as well. But no one has a part in that decision making other than the IEC members, and then it coming to us for approval.
Okay.
Provide some additional clarification because that was part of this that I wasn't completely aware of as well. And I apologize to our committee members and board staff with this. When the intervention program, it goes to EIC, which is treated very much like a board. That is another reason why when we went to Bagley-Keene and had those provisions changed, our board had to meet in person, our committees did not. And EIC was deemed to be very similar to a board. And so they have to continue to meet in person because they make decisions for the board. It's not a recommendation to the board. And so again, that was something that I learned just when the Bagley-Keene provisions changed at the end of this last year, that they do make those decisions without being board approved, through the BRN board approved, right? You guys delegate that through and it's all covered within statute. What was also discovered during that time was the program manager's role. And that is where we noticed some drift, where a lot of the decisions that were coming out of EIC were not being reviewed as much as they are now. And so when Shannon and Jaspreet and Yvonne started to really look at those processes, that is when and I'm saying IEC instead of EIC. That was just brought to my attention. I'm saying it incorrectly. I apologize. So with that, the executive officer appoints the program manager. And at that point is when I appointed Jaspreet to that program manager role so that there could be more of kind of a compare and contrast, really just following a lot of that. And so it is accurate that now these decisions that are made from the IEC, do go and are reviewed by the program manager now, which is Jaspreet. And then I'm even hearing now as I'm going through the audit that our board president asked me to do at the last board meeting, that meeting minutes are now reviewed for each IEC by the program manager, and before they're sent back to be added to the chart of the patient, etc. And so that is where there is some changes. One of the other big changes that when I met with Maximus, Jenny specifically, is because intervention was confidential and it was not disciplinary at all, the decision in order or the complaint and such that had been given to the board where the individual is now deciding to do probation was not shared with Maximus. And so Maximus only had the information from the participant as to why they were there. Now that that document is being shared with Maximus and part of the intake, Maximus has a better picture of what that participant is truly there for, in addition to them seeking assistance in recovery or mental health.
Thank you for that. It's just, that's all I had as a question. It just seemed, I know the program is not designed to set these licensees up to fail. I know the intention is to help them recover. So it seems to me there must be another part of the story other than what we've heard in public comment to help us understand why some of these recommendations are made the way they are, when with the knowledge we have, a lot of them didn't make any sense. So thank you for the input. I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering if at this time we should open it up for public comment. Before we do, I would just like to stress that we have 4 opportunities for public comment today, and I do value public comment very much. But I'm hoping that public comment will stick to the topic at hand. There'll be 4 opportunities to speak. So if you would just limit your comments to this item, and then, on the next item, which is discussing the IECs, we're going to open for public comment again, and then case managers on the 3rd item, and then general public comment at the end. So with that, I'm going to ask the board moderator to open it up for public comment.
Board moderator, I'm going to jump in real quick before you go. I want to just make real clear again, this is the agenda item that is for overview and comparison of the intervention program and probation. This is not an agenda item where we talk about requirements for work, narcotic pass. Those were discussed extensively at the previous meetings. We've learned a lot. I am currently in an active audit to learn more about that. And so we ask that you help us follow the specific agenda items, because we do not want to have to cut you off or redirect you. And so if you can please save your public comment. If you're going to talk specifically about IEC, if you're going to talk specific about case managers and stuff for later, this is just an overview and comparison of the intervention program. Just as an ask, not that you have to, if somebody has said comments in advance to you that resonate with you, that are similar, if you can consider a me too or a statement in support or something like that instead of repeating, that would be fantastic. It would really help us with getting through these items so that we can assist you. Thank you.
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public. Type in, "I would like to make a comment." Janelle would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
thank you, sir. So board member, Mr. Lawler, you had mentioned earlier the slide on costs being unintentionally misleading. I just wanted to comment on that really quickly. Ms. Johnson, you had put that in 2023, there was a participant who spent $1,620 on testing. I happen to know exactly who that participant is, and the cost is a little bit incorrect in that it does not include after hours fees, which can range anywhere up to about $50 to even $250, which is paid directly to the facilities. So the cost can vary a little bit from there, but that's not something that we would maybe expect you all to know unless we told you. But also in 2023, that participant did pay that much. However, in 2024, between June and January, that participant has now paid $2,130. That's only 6 months where they have spent $2,130, having no compliance issues, no relapse issues, showing only growth. And so the fact that maybe they spent less in 1 month, given that they had earned it, doing so well in the program, and having nothing changed, now are paying significantly more is an issue. Board member Ms. Cormack, you had mentioned that it's an intensive program with there are significant expectations, and that's correct. There are significant expectations, but what makes the difference between intervention and probation is that the expectations remain the same in probation, and they are outlined and followed. For us, they continually change, and this has not been an issue in the past. Ms. Melby, you mentioned that there's ample info on the website, and that is absolutely correct. There is ample information for us to make an informed decision. And up until the last year in this program, this hasn't been an issue. And it's only in the last several months that expectations have changed, rules have changed, requirements have changed, and that is the issue. And I know you don't want to get into details there for now, so that I just wanted to make sure that I just highlighted that there is ample information on there. It's just the problem is the changes that are happening now that we are all being subjected to now. One thing I do want to just mention real quick that Ms. Johnson, you had mentioned that in probation and intervention, the oversight, you're absolutely right. I will say I completely agree with you that in probation, they are checked at the very beginning, and their contract is gone over ad nauseum. And then they're seen as needed with their probation monitors. But in intervention, we are seen every single month. We are spoken to every single month. There is an intense amount of communication, and our expectations and what we are expected to do is discussed with us.
Thank you for your comment. Please remember to keep your comments at 2 minutes. Chris Elsey would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Else here. I'm the nurse support facilitator for the Central Coast of San Luis Obispo and surrounding areas. This is kind of a question for, this is actually perfect for, I have Shannon here, just on comparison contrast. So we were talking about costs, and the cost recovery area has been excluded from this talk here, because I have one of my nurses, I think she's owed about, or she has to pay about $16,000 over the next 2 to 3 years of her probation before she gets off, that she has to pay back for her investigation. So there's a considerable amount in cost recovery that was not talked about here, and maybe we can, some of those are huge, some of those are tiny. I have one nurse that doesn't have any, so it's kind of all across the board. And nurses may not know this all the way, before they choose either program, because that is not in the intervention program. So they do not have to pay those cost recovery, as I'm aware. So that may be something we can compare and contrast between the two programs, that there is a big difference in cost, definitely for probation, because they may have to pay back those cost recovery, especially if it's extensive investigation into their enforcement. Also, at the last board meeting, I brought up that my rural nurses on weekends are required to go to huge distances. For example, I live in Morro Bay. One of my nurses lives in Morro Bay, and she's been required twice to drive down on Sunday to Santa Barbara to test, which from where I drive there is on a Sunday, busy day is about 4 hours.
Chris,
And if she
Chris, if you can save that specific testing for the agenda item that's covering testing, that would be
well,
really.
This is the compare and contrast. So because
So
so
each,
this is
both probation and intervention have testing. And so unless you're saying that interventions testing's requirements are different than probation, if you're talking
I
about
am,
specific location issues,
I
that would
am,
be for that agenda item.
I
Okay,
am.
thank you.
Can I finish? Because I actually emailed you as well, and I haven't heard back from
Yes,
anyone from the board. I can't get answers on this question. So Virginia Matthews said
that's not
last time,
accurate. I have been
uh,
responding
I,
back to you, and
I
we
have not
have been
received an email back.
communicating.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Well, okay, I'm sorry for the miscommunication because I can't get an answer from anyone. Because Virginia Matthews group for intervention is allowed to test at home on weekends in the rural areas, but the probation nurses have been told now that they cannot. So I don't understand where there's some misequality here, why the probation nurses are not to do at-home testing in rural areas on weekends, but the intervention can. Like Virginia Matthews is allowing it, but the board is not. So I'm very confused. My nurses are asking me, I'm asking other people, you know, I'm supposed to be like kind of intermediary between the board and my groups, but I don't get answers. You know, I call the probation monitor, they either don't answer, never call me back, shut me down. You know, it gets a little frustrating, especially I was going to ask a very simple question here and I already get like run over. So, excuse me.
Chris, I'm
Thank
hoping
you.
that you understand that my intention was not to run you over. We are desperately trying to get the participants the help that they need, including the answers that you are seeking. And so we're asking for the agenda items to be very specific on topic today so that we can do this. I do have an email from you that you did ask this question. I am researching it. We have several contracts with our board for different types of testing. And so as part of the audit that I was asked to do by our board president, those are some of the things. I actually have a meeting with the Montana EO, who also participates with Maximus, that utilizes the remote testing. We are getting more information on that. And as Jenny had shared in that prior board meeting, that remote testing was brand new, that just started. They're just rolling that out. And so if that is something that we can get to our probationers, that will happen as well. But that is a process that we have to follow our guidelines in order to get that going. And so I want you to know that you're heard. I want you to know that your comments are very important for us. And you have been spot on in so many things, bringing this forward to us. And so I will go ahead and I will learn more. And when we have answers, I will share those answers to you.
Well, I don't understand why I wouldn't have gotten a quick answer back from anyone about why was this just like, well, we're still looking into this. Could have been quick. And then, okay, fine. But I'm just not getting, I'm getting dead ends wherever I go. I mean, I have no one that a lot of us nurse support group facilities have to ask each other because we can't get straight answers from the board anymore.
Thank you for your comment. Matthew A. would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Morning, everybody. I just quickly, you guys were talking about providing more information about the program and the compare on the website and the comparison and helping people choose, help people decide which program to go into. But the issue is that the program requirements changed recently, so you can provide all the information you want ahead of time, but if the requirements are suddenly changing 3 years into a program, it doesn't really help much. Well, I'm all for more information, and I think that's a great idea. But if the program requirements are changing, then what's the point of providing that information ahead of time? Ms. Johnson in her slides went through the difference between probation and intervention, and she mentioned withdrawal or termination from the intervention program would resurface accusations, and now that confidential information in the intervention program can be used against that participant in the disciplinary side. I just bring that up because when participants complained about these changes as far back as, and the difference between probation and intervention as far back as December of 2023, directly to board members, they were told, well, this is a voluntary program. Too bad. You don't like it, get out of the program. How can you say it's a voluntary program when the now confidential information you provided to the program could be used against you if you withdraw from the program? So it's essentially holding a gun to your head and saying, I dare you to leave the program because we're going to use that information against you. The slides also mentioned employment, and that employment is approved for intervention. It's approved by the Maximus case manager to make sure it qualifies for the requirement. And that's one of the issues as well, because participants had their requirement, submitted their job descriptions, they got approved by Maximus, and then 6 months later that requirement changed. So to say it's approved by the case manager and it's all fine and dandy is a little misleading. The picture was painted a little bit rosier than it actually is. And then everybody mentioned the vault costs. I won't get into that, but I do appreciate Ms. Cormack and Mr. Lawler for mentioning those costs as well. Thank you so much.
Before moving to the next one, this is Reza. I just wanted to respond to that briefly with some clarification, just to make sure there's no misunderstanding. I believe that the previous commenter spoke about the use of confidential information from the intervention program in a possible later disciplinary proceeding. I wanted to be sure that there's no misinformation out there on that. And I can see, I think the comment that triggered that last public comment may have been a little too simplified. So on that, to be clear, information about a participant's participation in the intervention program is confidential, and it's not used in a later discipline proceeding unless at the time of that participant's termination from the program, they are deemed to be, quote, a threat to the public or their own health and safety. That's under Business Professions Code 2770.11 subdivision B. So it's only when that determination is made that there's a threat to the public or the licensee's own health and safety when the otherwise confidential information from the intervention program can be used in a later discipline proceeding. Otherwise, if a participant is terminated from the program but is not deemed to present a threat to the public or their own safety, then their name and license number can be reported to enforcement, but the rest of the information from the program itself isn't used in discipline later on. Just wanted to be clear on that. Apologize for any misunderstanding that may have led to that. So
thank you, Mr. Pujahesh. And isn't it accurate that the Business Profession Code allows the BRN to use confidential information if the participant files any kind of claim against the BRN?
You, I think, are referring to section 2770.12, subdivision C, which says a registered nurse shall be deemed to have waived any rights granted by any laws and regulations relating to confidentiality of the intervention program if he or she does any of the following: 1, 2, 3. I'll skim through these unless one is presents information relating to any aspect of the intervention program during any stage of the disciplinary process subsequent to the filing of an accusation, statement of issues, or petition to compel an examination, ... Subdivision 2 is files a lawsuit against the board relating to any aspect of the intervention program. And 3 is claims in defense to a disciplinary action based on a complaint that led to the registered nurse's participation in the intervention program, that he or she was prejudiced by the length of time that passed between the alleged violation and the filing of the accusation, ... So it just, that subdivision that I was just reading from, it in that context, it's the nurses, they have the confidentiality right, and they have the ability to waive it by doing one of those 3 things that I just read from statute.
Great, thank you.
Those are 2 different statutes.
Great, thank you. And finally, Ms. Melby mentioned Maximus does not know the circumstances under which participants come into the program. This is not true. Many participants have come into the program with accusations up for the public to see and have been discussed at their initial IEC meetings and subsequently with their case managers. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you for your comment. Daniel would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
I am a participant of the Maximus program, the recovery program, for the past 5.5 years. On the last meeting, Shannon stated that on the last year or so, we get tested about 12 times. It's only July. I have already been tested 21 times. I have to go back today to go test it. That's including that today. That's $2,100 out of pocket. Also, when I entered the program, I was not really given a choice. What I was told is you either enter the program or charges are going to be pressed against your license. I have been sober for the past 4.5 years, and I still continue to test this much. I had my last meeting in June 27th, which was supposed to be my last meeting, and I was retained because I teared up when I spoke about the death of my sister for about a minute. I composed myself and I terminated my meeting. And so I continued to be in the meeting, in the program. I apologize. And no one has given me an answer as to why. So in the meantime, I continue to get tested more and more. I am at a point where financially I am strapped. I haven't had a positive test in the past 4.5 years. So I just would like to get an answer from Shannon Johnson, since she was there at the meeting, and Jamie was also there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Kara or Flaherty would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
I am the Director of Nursing at Lifelong Medical. We're a federally qualified health center. So I oversee about 50 plus nurses. I think I have about 15 nurses either in probation or in diversion at this moment in time, or who have previously been. The number might even be up to 20. That's an estimate. So they support a number of our clinics, and we have clinics that vary from 1 nurse at that clinic up to 6 nurses. I just lost a nurse who was in diversion because of the new requirement. And my statement now is that I would really appreciate if for employers that we could have some guidance about how to navigate each program. I've sort of figured it out through experience and just sort of blindly navigating through. But it is challenging. And so to have like the slides that were shared earlier were incredibly helpful. It would be very helpful to have something along those lines. Excuse me. I just had something to drink, so I'm like joking. It would be very helpful to have something to give guidance to the center directors or site leadership, because they're often asking me for this guidance. And I'm going off of my historical information mostly, especially when it comes to this new requirement. It's really thrown everyone into sort of a tizzy. We've been trying to figure out how to navigate this. So if there could be some communication with employers in regards to both of these programs, really, that would be incredibly helpful. When I started, I was having one-on-one meetings with, for probation at least. I'm blanking on her name. I think it was Deborah, and she would meet with us and go through everything. But there wasn't a differentiation between, okay, so this is what minimum, moderate, and maximum monitoring will look like. It just sort of, it was talked about in a big sort of way, like, but it seems that there are very clear guidelines around that, and I haven't been provided with that information. I actually put together a folder and a document to help guide it, but it's been based on my information and some information I pulled off the internet, but I would love to have that guidance. I think it would be incredibly helpful so that we can support our nurses and make sure that they're successful, because we're very invested in their success as well. And that's it for now, but thank you very much. That's all for my comment.
So Tara, real quick, just for some clarification for you. Deborah was a nursing education consultant, and in probation, employment approvals and such where we speak directly with the employer happens through board staff, specifically a nursing education consultant. And that is not the process with intervention. So with that compare and contrast, intervention employment approvals go through Maximus, and that is managed through them. But we will, as part of that audit that I'm doing, we'll compare and contrast that process as well. And if there is some best practices that we can share that our NECs do for probation employment approvals and talking to the employer and giving that information, we'll be sure to share that with Maximus as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Danielle would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
To make a point, if Maximus is paid per participant, is it any surprise that nurses are having their finishing line for the program and their completion of the program moved so that they are trapped in the program for longer periods of time? The Maximus Accountability Project has questioned whether the company is reaping unfairly high profits from state agencies with whom they have contracts. I think we can safely assume Maximus is doing just that with the DCA. They are a for-profit company, and they are profiting off of vulnerable nurses when they are at one of the lowest points in their lives. Revenue at Maximus for the full fiscal year of 2023 increased 5.9% over the prior year to $4.9 billion. The DCA budget, which is available online through the California budget website, they are set to pay Maximus over $12.4 billion. If you guys don't think you're getting ripped off by this company, I don't know what else to tell you. I think we need a serious look into this. I think we need an audit on what this program is costing the state and what it is doing to nurses. Recently, a friend of mine had to leave the intervention program due to the cost. Without the ability to work, she simply could not afford the approximately $800 she was spending just to participate in the program. She and her family could not afford her recovery. And that's not who we're supposed to be. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Tony would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
To say, I feel like, the restrictions and the tone of the meeting feels definitely a little punitive, and like, you guys have to understand this is the only time we have to voice. I hear a lot of talking, I hear a lot of defending, but I feel like I don't hear a lot of listening at times from certain members, and I won't say any names in particular. There are some real issues here. And so, somebody, I think one of the slides I was driving to go test, that's another thing. I feel like so many of us got pinged to test today. So I'm wondering if that was strategy not to have us all on the meeting, but that's another topic. So I was driving, but somebody said, oh, now Maximus has access to our actual complaints and files so that they can make better informed decisions. Some of us have been in the program for 4 years. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Whether they had access to the files or they didn't have access to the files, it's irrelevant. We're recovered. Probation participants, they can petition for early release after 2 years. Minimum time that we do in Maximus is 3 years, you know? So it's like, it's just like pointless. And, you know, I'm waiting to hear the comparison and contrast of this audit that, you know, Ms. Melby is doing. Who are the names? Who are the people that are being included? What are the metrics being considered? Is it being fair? Are the whole files looked at in its totality? That's what I'm interested in hearing. I'm interested in hearing some solutions. How are we moving forward? How are you guys going to get better at communicating the information everywhere, right? But somehow the information that's there is still confusing. Somehow the information that's there is not being disseminated correctly, because I also wasn't given a choice about which program to enter. I didn't even know anything about probation. All I knew was Maximus, and I was told that if I did not sign up for this program, like basically I would be prosecuted. And then for Reza to say that, oh, if, you know, we would, our files would only be, you know, sent to the, sent for review for prosecution or whatever if we were deemed to be a threat to the public. Well, you guys are holding us in this program. So, you know, it goes without saying that I feel like if after 4 years, I said, even though I've had a perfect time, I've done nothing wrong, I still would be sent for, you know, my file would still be sent for prosecution. So it's still, it's like holding us hostage. And I just don't understand how this is not being translated over. It's just, it's beyond frustrating. You know, I've never seen, you know, so there's so much harm being done. You know, it just seems like the wheels of justice would move a little bit faster.
Thank you for your comment. Nurse 99 would like to make a comment. Please remember to keep your comments to 2 minutes. Thank you.
I just wanted to touch on a few issues that were mentioned. Shannon had mentioned that they do explain Maximus versus probation to participants, but like the other participants have been saying, that was never told to me. I was told that this was a one-time offer and my only option, or there would be potentially multiple felonies and I'd never work as a nurse again. So it's not exactly voluntary, and it would have been nice to know the comparison between Maximus and probation. And also it was mentioned about the, you know, the relationship of the probation officers with their participants versus the case managers with us and Maximus. And with how everything has changed so far, it's kind of like so many different shades of gray now. And I'm told in my IEC meeting that I need to speak to my case manager about any specific questions, but they don't have the answers. And I don't know that it's any fault of their own. There's so much new information and unclear information coming down the pike that it's kind of like the blind leading the blind now. And we are the collateral damage. We're held in this program longer because, you know, the requirements can't seem to get figured out. So I entered the program, and then I just found out by accident last Wednesday that I had a felony warrant for my arrest that was placed back in March. So it wasn't exactly accurate that if we enter this program that withholds charges. So now I'm in this program for an undetermined amount of time, and now I'm facing felony charges. Mr. Lawler brought up a good point. Who holds the IEC accountable? I have wondered that myself. Where is the checks and balances? How can this group of people that I never speak to be allowed to make decisions about my life? Are they speaking to my case manager? You know, they don't even allow a question session anymore. They kept trying to hang up the call, and I had to stop them and say, no, I have questions. There was nothing mentioned about transition, and I'm at about the 2.5-year mark. And it's just super frustrating. Not one question about me, my recovery, how am I doing? Nothing. And when I would ask questions, I got blank stares and radio silence. So that tells me that they don't know what they're doing either. Yeah, it's just the cost so far that I've paid since January 22 is $10,700.
Thank you for your comment. S would like to make a comment. One second.
Sorry,
please.
moderator, 1 second.
Yes.
This is Reza. Just briefly, I can't respond to the entire last comment, but I wanted to clarify something again. And I can't speak to somebody's specific case. I don't even know the last comment or the facts of their case. But one thing that I think I understood she said was that she found out she's got a warrant for her arrest and thought that her participation in the intervention program would have forestalled that. It sounds like the warrant is a criminal matter. Participation in the intervention program doesn't preclude any criminal action by criminal authorities. We don't have control over that. I presume that was something unrelated, but I again don't know the facts of it. And the other thing is that the intervention program, to the extent that it's been characterized as voluntary, I mean, the reality is that the decision that's often faced is prosecution in a administrative hearing where one has their day in court and their opportunity to address a judge and all that versus the option of the intervention program. So, with the threat of prosecution, I guess it's a choice that's made. It's understandable that folks think it's not voluntary with that threat looming over them, but that's the reality of it. It is definitely noteworthy. Some of what I've taken away from some of the comments, though, is how that's kind of characterized in almost a threatening and intimidating way, and that is concerning. But mostly, I just wanted to address the piece about the warrant and the confusion over, or what would seem to be, to me, confusion over participation in the intervention program somehow forestalling what the criminal authorities do. That's it, so we can move on.
Thank you. S would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Is she was only given intervention as an option. The other option she was given was threats, and it was pretty terrifying. So when you're talking about showing nurses their options, it would be nice to present them both to start with. And when you're presenting intervention, it would also be useful to let them know that it's administered by a prime contractor. Their primary goal is to maximize shareholder value, not to provide a service. They're trying to do the bare minimum here. Considering the per nurse cost, considering the amount of the contract they're given and the number of participants, it does sound like they're just wasting money. But anyway, it is useful. It would be to give them maybe some contacts of other nurses that are in this program so that they can choose not to join it, as they complain of gaslighting, feeling like guinea pigs. It's also useful to tell them that requirements are subject to change at any time, and that the actual length that they will be in this program is up to someone they can't talk to. And then on the costs, the slides, we're in the car. The slide that I've seen is completely inaccurate. I think you need to do an audit for each nurse of what they actually paid for intervention, because we're 3 years in this. It's not at all. It's not even within the range of what's in your slides. Look, we're just pissed, and you should address it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Stephen Fisher would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Stephen Fisher, on your phone, it's *6 or #6. I'll come back to you, Stephen. Nancy O would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Nancy, on your computer, there's a window that pops up behind your other things. It's a small window that says unmute me if you would like to make a comment. Thank you. Committee Chair Wynn and Reza, Chris Else would like to continue his public comment since he was interrupted, but he did go over, technically he did go over 2 minutes. He went closer to 3, possibly more, and that wasn't including the back and forth. So that's up to you.
Yeah, I recall there was some back and forth during his comment. I can't say for sure whether he got 2 minutes, not including that. So I would suggest give him an additional 30 seconds.
And just a reminder that there are 3 more public comment opportunities today. So yeah, I'd be willing to give 30 more seconds also. There was some back and forth. Thank you.
While we're paused here, strictly to gauge where we're at, moderator, how many public comments remain on this item at this point?
Looks like there are 5, but some people are just putting comments in, so I'm asking them if they want to speak, but those are the ones that aren't unmuting. And then some people are putting multiple requests in, so I'm giving them the opportunity, but they're not unmuted.
Gives us a sense of where we're at.
Yeah, so we're about 5.
Okay.
5 more.
With that, I think we can go to Mr. Else.
Okay, Chris.
Thank you for allowing me 30 more seconds since I was kind of derailed there. Sorry, my thoughts are a little hazy. I'm undergoing cancer treatment right now, so I can't always speak as eloquently as I would otherwise. But since I've been shut down, silenced, and bullied today, I would like to kind of put in a few more comments here that I feel like Bagley Keene. I actually took the time to actually look at the agenda item and 4.0 and saw the compare and contrast between the two things, between intervention and probation. And that's when I wanted to make some public comments here, and I shouldn't have been interrupted and told to speak later because I was the one who actually spoke during the correct time. So I feel like I was already treated in contempt by the time I even opened my mouth, because every time I speak here, I don't get answers. That's why I have to come to this meeting, is because I call the board, I don't get answers, and this is the only way that sometimes the board members will actually listen to what our nurse facilitators are having to deal with every day. I'm in contact with at least 15 other nurse facilitators that feel the same way as me. So I guess we're just going to have to be organized and figure out what to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. LH would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Me to speak. I wanted to say I appreciate Mr. Lawler's comments. I think he made some very astute questions, asked some very astute questions, and I appreciated that. One of the things he mentioned was more transparency regarding the cost of the 2 programs in comparison, which I think is a wonderful idea, since what was presented was strictly the testing costs. Some of the other costs, including IOP, $5,000 to $10,000, aftercare, $3,000 or more, nurse support group, facilitator meetings, $1,000 a year, etc. And those costs kind of go on and on. My concern is, even if there was full transparency with comparison for individuals looking to enter the program, whether they've had a complaint or they are self-referral, including the transparency that they likely may not be working for 6 months to a year, I worry that is going to deter participants from joining the program. Had I seen the extraordinary costs I would be facing, I don't know if I would have joined the program. And then what would have happened? So this is my worry, is that participants are not going to join. They're going to surrender their license, and maybe that is how you're saying will protect the public, but I don't think it will, because those individuals will still be out in the public, getting behind the wheel under the influence, perhaps, getting other jobs where they are still not in recovery and still addicts. So I still think that is a disservice to both our nurses as well as the public. There has got to be another solution. And there are other states who have found other solutions. They have done things, passed through legislation to get stipends for nurses to help cover the cost. So I encourage the board to continue to look for solutions like that, and not just that, let's give full transparency, because I think that's going to have the opposite effect. You're going to see decreased enrollment and we're going to lose nurses. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Jessica would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Jessica, on your computer, possibly behind a window or something, you'll have a small unmute me button. There you go. Oh, you had it.
There we go. Thank you.
There you go.
I wasn't sure I really wanted to speak today. I wanted to share that article that I did, which was from a journalism entry that was in the Montana Free Press last year. They talked about their experience with Maximus and how their healthcare providers felt. And I think it's really eye-opening to see what happened in Montana. And it feels like a lot of what happened there is happening here. So I really just wanted to share that. But I will say too, I was under the impression, based on a conversation with my nurse group facilitator, that we would be talking about the narcotic access requirements. And I just want to quickly say, since I know we don't have time, I just want to say how close are we to finding an answer? I am in the process of making very important decisions for my future, including I was accepted to the BSN to MSN program, and I'm already behind on late fees because I've been waiting to pay, knowing that I don't know if I'll be able to truly go into the program or if I should decline and apply again later. They don't let you defer. I would have to reapply next year. It would be a year wasted. I'd love to move forward in my life and start progressing, but I feel like I have no answers, and it's been very, very hard with some of those time-sensitive issues. So I guess I want some guidance. Are we close? Should I simply just decline just to be safe? Because my concern is, of course, having 2 jobs and doing the master's program. Anyway, thank you for your time. I recommend the article. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Stephen Fisher would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Stephen, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm a member of the public, and I came to the last meeting expecting to hear some resolutions as a follow-up to the last meeting. And I'm so displeased to see that there are no pending solutions, resolutions, or discussions surrounding it that have been put forth today. The last meeting was almost a month ago, and the items that were discussed for over 9 hours didn't even make the agenda as promised. We were told that that meeting would be held in 10 days. So my question now is, where is the accountability? I'm disturbed that you could all listen to these participants share their troubling experiences with Maximus and BRN, and it's not at the top of the list of the discussion. While we understand this is a complex process, you must understand also that there are human beings at the other end of this that are still suffering and have no more understanding or hope than they did in December when they started raising these issues and were ignored. The public is getting to see in real time the lack of communication and the lackadaisical stance that BRN is taking. We are calling on you to act today, once again, to make this right for let the participants who have already met the requirements and completed be out. Thank you for the time.
Reza here. Before going to the next comment, just a quick thing I wanted to insert. This responds a little bit to the last comment, but also hopefully Jessica, who made the prior comment, is also still listening. So I just wanted to kind of address the agenda for this meeting and how we kind of got here. So the last time that the full board met, there was a two days scheduled of meetings, including 2 board meetings and 2 committee meetings. This committee was scheduled to meet that time following the board meeting. The board meeting occurred first on a Friday, and it went the full day with discussion about the topics on that agenda, which included the narcotics issue, among other things. Because of the length of that meeting and the amount of discussion there, much of which was public comment, which was great, we didn't get to conduct this EIIC meeting on that day when it was scheduled. Therefore, it got carried forward to this meeting that we're having today. So this is basically that meeting that was not able to be held last time because we were engaged in the board meeting discussion. Today's meeting, this is an advisory committee, so getting to the question about how soon might there be a resolution on the narcotics issue, I think was specifically what was focused on, or whatever it was. Today, recommendations can be made to the board on the specific agenda items that are on today's agenda. The next board meeting is August, I believe 2021 or 21-22, thereabouts. That's the next board meeting that's scheduled. I fully anticipate that issues relating to intervention will be on that agenda, including the narcotics issue. So to answer the question, that's likely the soonest that board action could occur to have the board direct some action. And that's also how this agenda today, that hopefully explains the contents of today's agenda, that it was carried over from what wasn't able to be discussed the last time this was scheduled. And that last time, the narcotics issue, all of that was in the board meeting where we had the full board diving deep into that, and that's going to be continued in that August meeting. So not sure if that answered all of those folks' questions, but hopefully at least some of it was helpful. Sorry for that interruption. Just wanted to say that you can go ahead to the next comment.
Thank you for your comment. Anthony would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Anthony, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Anthony, we can hear you. Well, you're not speaking, so we can't hear you, but Anthony, we were hearing you when you were asking if we could hear you, but we didn't hear anything after that. So maybe,
Yeah,
oh,
can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I was just saying that the difference between the intervention and probation is during probation, you have a clear outline and the guidance on how to get out. With the intervention, it seemed like at first there was a guideline. When you met with your IEC, they told you your requirements. But what a lot of the complaints are, everyone has met those requirements. And as of December of last year, those requirements have changed. And due to the change of those requirements and how drastic they are, that's why a lot of these nurses are up in arms. So if that can be understood and something done about that, this issue could be resolved. That's all I have to say for now.
Thank you for your comment. M would like to make a comment, I believe. Hold on, let me see. M, if you'd like to make a comment, please unmute. Thank you. GK would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. GK, go ahead.
DTS calendar. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to point out this meeting is not posted on the DCS website, and I'm aware, and I'm sure you're all aware, until the Office of Public Affairs of Department of Consumers is informed about this meeting, they don't post it. So I'm sure why the board didn't take that extra step to post this important meeting for public to view. Not everybody needs to log in to view this meeting. The agenda shows public information. So DCS accountability and transparency is part of DCS core value strategic plan 22-27. So I would appreciate if the board first starts showing to the people what exactly they're talking about and doing by posting this important information and not hide behind saying, oh, it is on our meeting list or we send email. So that is just excuses. I'm sorry to say. This should be on the DCS calendar and the webcast page. So if the board really cares, please make sure that happens by end of today before we get to the other part of the agenda. And also I'm wondering, why is just Maximus part of this discussion for you being used by DC and BRN for all this many years? It has been for decades. They've been using this almost 2-3 decades. They've been using just Maximus. What is the process that DC and BRN follows in choosing Maximus over others? It's common knowledge Maximus is a for-profit organization. I'm sure nurses is helping the nurses is not their main criteria. And if we all think so, I'm sorry to say that's a fallacy. It's time the board on the DCA tells how they go about choosing Maximus as the provider compared to others, unless there is some hidden agendas like a quid pro quo that the DC and BRN is following and trying to just use Maximus to cover something else. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for your comment.
This is Reza. I'll just real quickly. A couple things on that comment. One was the latter piece of it was about the process for selecting Maximus. There's a competitive bid process where a solicitation document is published publicly per the usual state contracting process, and any interested companies will respond to that with a bid, and there's predetermined evaluation criteria. So those bids are all evaluated according to those criteria, and a vendor is selected. So it happens to be that Maximus has won that contract for, I guess, several iterations now, but that's how the process goes. I think that the gentleman was commenting also about the webcast not being available on the DCA website. So I'll just explain what I kind of understand about that situation. First of all, this meeting, per kind of the usual BRN standard, is being broadcast via WebEx. The agenda went out via email and is on the board website, and there's even a box on the website that I'm looking at that says live. Click to participate in the WebEx. Often we additionally, in addition to WebEx, have a webcast where folks can view but not participate. I believe the situation here was that because this meeting was pushed forward from the previously scheduled date, it wasn't previously on the calendar until we had to kind of reschedule it, that webcast service wasn't requested for today. It was not a intention to make this meeting less accessible. I think it's fair to apologize on behalf of the board to the extent that it was less accessible for that reason, but it's still broadcast via WebEx per the norm. There's also a telephone number that's available as a backup, and I think, Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, it'll still be on YouTube later with links posted. So there was still a lot of communication about ways that this meeting is going to be available to the public.
Yeah, you are not incorrect, Reza. It will still be posted on YouTube. It'll still be available for anybody to watch at any point. I did speak with Board Ops and ask if they can get webcast services for the remainder of the meeting. I do not know their availability, but I was not aware of that until the public comment was received. But we are on it and working to see what we can do to rectify that.
Thank you very much. Just while we're on a quick, break from public comment, board moderator, I'd love to know how many more people in line. We just need to schedule a quick bio break for
Yeah,
board
there.
members.
Well, the comments create more comments, which create more requesters. So we go from 5 to 6 to 9 to 5 to 4. Right now, currently we're at 5.
It is
Should we
10:45, so we could go on a break now and just come back at 11 and continue with public comment if that's something that you're wanting to do.
I would be very interested in doing that. So I'm gonna, as chair, I'm gonna just make that decision on my own. We will take a 15-minute break, 14-minute break, and come back at 11 o'clock. Thank you all very much. The hour of 11 o'clock having arrived, perhaps we could start with a roll call to make sure we have committee members here, and we'll go back to public comment. So Tricia Nguyen is present. Alice Cormack?
Cormack present.
Thank you. And David Lawler?
Lawler present.
Great. Okay, we have the 3 committee members with us. Just before we start public comment again, I just want to remind the public that although I understand the frustration of us not taking action, our action will be informed by public comment. So I know everybody's a little frustrated, but with this process, but I feel very strongly we just need to listen to the public on each item before we can begin making decisions. And that's what happened at the board meeting. It's happening again today. So please bear with us. Okay, board moderator, I am turning it back to you. Thank you.
Mark would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right. Forgive me if I rehash something that was stated. I joined late in the meeting, but I just want to kind of reiterate what Anthony said in an earlier comment, that one of the major distinctions between probation and intervention is this idea of clarity of your path in the program. And there's been a lot of narrative about making intervention a more individualized program. But in my experience, in the 3.5 years that I've been in the intervention program, it was more individualized in the past than it is now. And with some of these kind of blanket requirements just going out, it seems that we've taken a step more towards the probation side of things than the intervention or recovery side of things. And it doesn't feel like it has the same undertones that it had 3.5 years ago. And I don't think that's any fault of Maximus. I think it's fault of direction from board staff and from a possible reinterpretation of uniform standards that has now affected so many people in the intervention program. And with fee transparency, it's very difficult, Mr. Lawler, for us to have transparent fees because of this quote unquote individualized narrative. You know, over 3.5 years into the program with 100% compliance and having passed narcotics for over 6 months, I continue to have new requirements levied onto me in the intervention program. And so now I'm having to, out of my pocket, pay for bi-weekly therapy sessions because this was something that my intervention committee felt that I needed to do after my clinical reassessment. So despite having done IOP and nurse support group for literally hundreds of weeks, plus quarterly therapy, plus additional aftercare and 4 to 7 Narcotics Anonymous meetings a week, at this time in my program when I should be getting stepped down, they added another requirement that added an additional out-of-pocket cost for me, as much as $130 a session twice a month. So now my total cost for participation in the program last month was $760, with testing, administrative fees, support group fee, and now this biweekly therapy fee. So the fees are just getting out of control in this more individualized narrative, when in reality, the program is less individualized than it was 3.5 years ago, in my experience. So thank you for listening to us, and I appreciate everyone taking such a vested interest in this.
Thank you for your comment. Courtney Ivy would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Ms. Courtney, and I want to thank this committee for being willing to look further into both of these programs. And I want to thank the Board of Nursing for my 39 years of recovery. So thank you. Do you know, I'm looking at some of the certificates on my wall, and I have worked with the board. I worked under Ruth Ann Terry when she was the executive director, and I worked under Louise Bailey. Looking at 4.0, overview and comparison of intervention and probation, I'm not sure the highlights of the major differences between the two programs were really hit. Over the years, I have become so familiar with the Nurse Practice Act, and it's so clear. It is so clear what the goals and objectives of these two programs are. And I think up until 2 years ago, when a chief and a new program manager, were assigned to be in charge of 3 programs, that there is no comparison between the program that talks about intervention. It is about helping nurses recover, helping nurses look at their addiction, look at the consequences of their addiction, and to agree to follow a very stringent contract in order to improve their knowledge of addiction and change their behaviors. Probation, on the other hand, and I've been involved with the board since 1997. I've never seen trying to combine these 3 programs under one chief. I'm not familiar with that title of chief, but I am very concerned with the role of the chief and the program manager. Both people come into leading the program of recovery with no experience. No, all their experience is with a background of probation and a background of enforcement, which again, in the Nurse Practice Act, is very clear that in the intervention program, that the program manager have experience in substance abuse treatment. There's no definition for what the chief will.
Thank you for your comment.
Board moderator, before you move on to the next one, there was a public comment that was made in the chat about closed captioning, so I wanted to address that. On the bottom left-hand side of your screen, there's a small, looks like a bubble that says CC on it. If anybody is needing to access closed captioning, just click on that and it'll pop up closed captioning. I believe there is also an option to do language translation as well that we had added to our webcast, our WebEx, sorry, to make sure that that was clear. So I just wanted to address the public comment that had requested via typing that to please add closed captioning. Closed captioning is there and available. And then to address the prior public commenter about the chief, it is the chief of enforcement that they are referencing, that is Shannon Johnson. I started in this role in 2020, and just so you know, that was before Shannon Johnson was in this role, and it was the same organization chart where the prior chief of enforcement had the same oversight as the current chief of enforcement, and that just with a change of staff does not make the org chart changed or different. That just means that this person was promoted to that position, and the changes are not relative to her. This is a group. This is a board staff. We take feedback from many, and so I just wanted to make sure that that was clear to everybody on the call. Thanks.
Sorry. Thank you for your comment. Committee Chair Nguyen, there are no other public requests for comments on the WebEx. I am told there are no public requests for comments at the Sacramento meeting room. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Well, thank you all for your input on this important topic. The executive officer, Loretta Melby, has assured us that she is auditing this program, turning over every rock and looking to see how we might improve things. We've certainly heard a lot of, worthwhile comments today. I'm not going to list them all, but, certainly there continues to be a frustration that the goal line or the expectation seems to be fluid. So, of course, she's looking at that. And that there seems to be a disconnect between case managers and maybe BRN staff. I know she'll look into that. I did hear one comment that I had a question about, and that is something about if you have certain offenses that precludes your participation in one program or another. That was certainly not my understanding. Could we have a little clarification on that? I don't know who I would be addressing this to.
Okay. Yeah,
Shannon.
that's okay. I'll go ahead and answer it.
Thank you, Shannon.
So, yes, there are within our statute, there are eligibility requirements. So if they fall under one of those where, like, for instance, one of them is if they have been terminated from any other intervention program, if they have had discipline against their license already, they would not be eligible for the program. So for instance, if someone had a DUI 10 years ago, maybe they got a citation, that would not be considered discipline because it's a citation and they would still be eligible. They would have to actually have a formal disciplinary action against their license, and then that would make them ineligible.
Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. Any closing comments from other committee members?
I want to take 1 minute just to make sure that I have all of the takeaways. And so the ask is to have an update on the website that talks about the specific compare versus contrast with the intervention program and probation. That we have a follow-up discussion about the cost recovery that is specific to probation. And is not a requirement for intervention when we're looking at doing a range of potential cost for each one of the programs. That the employers would like additional information on compare and contrast as well. I was also going to put the difference on employment request, whether they go through an NEC, nursing education consultant for probation, and Maximus for intervention. Was there more that I may have missed or I'm not accurately reviewing and bringing back up?
That reflects the list that I had. Any other comments from committee members?
This is, sorry. This is Board Member Cormack. Yes, that also reflects the list of official requests. I think there was a a theme about the changing over time, and whether that's related to the specific instance we find ourselves in or to the reality that during recovery things will change for each of the people. I think a sort of on the, I'm not going to say on the compare and contrast list, I think it is relevant that during the intervention program, based on a nurse's recovery status, that requirements could change, whereas in the probation program, I'm not aware that there are what I think people are perceiving as increased hurdles. So that seems like an expectation setting thing that would be regardless, again, of our current situation, which would be true over time. So if we could just add that to the list. Thank you so much, EO Melby.
I have that. Thank you. And thank you guys for your patience. It's been 3 weeks since the last board meeting. And I am working as diligently as I can on this. It's unfortunately not my only priority, but it is a very high priority. So that is getting the majority of my attention. I've met with Maximus, and Jenny can explain probably 4 or 5 times. I did receive access to their system and received training, various reports. I've met with several board staff. I've met with our DCA director as well. I've reached out to set appointments with Montana's Board of Nursing, as I had mentioned. They had been on a week vacation, so I didn't get a response back until just recently. And then I do have meetings with other board and bureau executive officers throughout California that utilize Maximus, and that is 8 other boards and bureaus that do. And so I'll be meeting with them as well as doing, to answer one of the public comments, a deep dive into each individual's specific chart, just to see if I'm noticing trends, if we're able to make any immediate changes. One of the changes that I did hear, and Jenny, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that it was mentioned that a missed call was treated as a positive test and they were 30 days off work. And that's something that occurs in probation. And so in contrast to intervention, that has been changed and that is not currently happening anymore. And so that is my understanding, but I just want to make sure that that's accurate. But just in the last 3 weeks, it's been one implementation in that compare and contrast as I'm deep diving in that has already been adjusted.
Great, thanks very much. We're going to close out this item and we're going to move to item number 5.0. Again, an information only discussion regarding issues surrounding the intervention evaluation committees and their meetings, including but not limited to a discussion of IEC member vacancy and recruitment efforts, frequency, length, and legal requirements, logistics, etc. of IEC meetings, and assignment of IEC participants to IECs. So thank you very much. We will be having public comment after this item is presented and committee members have had a chance to ask questions. So again, Shannon, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, this is Shannon Johnson. I'm the board's enforcement division chief. I'll be going over item 5.0. This is the first slide is the IEC composition. So in previous public comment during a recent board meeting, there were several areas of concern and questions surrounding intervention evaluation committees. I shared the following slides previously, but wanted to go over some of them again. I wanted to start with the composition of the committee. So a committee is composed of, it's dictated first by Business and Professions Code 2770.2. Each committee consists of 3 RNs, a physician, and 1 public member. The RNs need to have demonstrated expertise in the field of chemical dependency or psychiatric nursing. The physician must hold an active license specializing in the diagnosis and treatment of addictive diseases or mental illness. And the public member needs to have knowledge in the field of chemical dependency or mental illness. For the term limits, the IEC members are only able to serve 2 consecutive 4-year terms, just exactly like the board members do. That's pursuant to Business and Professions Code 131. There may be a 1-year grace period once the term expires. These appointments or reappointments to the second term are all by vote of the full 9-member board. In recent past, we had found that there were several members that had surpassed 2 4-year term limits. This led to the removal of those members from their seat and required intensive recruitment efforts, which I had reported on roughly a year and a half ago when this recruitment period started. At that time, we also discovered that IEC members were being utilized as substitutes for IECs they were not appointed to, as well as IEC meetings not following Bagley-Keene. With these items being addressed, there were several meetings that needed to be canceled due to quorum issue. Thankfully, we have been able to appoint several new evaluation committee members and currently only have 4 vacancies out of the 45 positions, as well as established meeting standards to incorporate Bagley-Keene. We continue to attend every IEC to ensure that Bagley-Keene is being followed and educate the IECs on all laws that regulate that program. For the roles and responsibilities, the committee members have the responsibility to evaluate the nurses that request participation into the program according to the guidelines prescribed by the board. They are also required to review and designate treatment services needed for recovery, including but not limited to inpatient treatment, intensive outpatient treatment for rehabilitation. They are to consider, in the case of each nurse, whether or not the nurse can resume the practice of nursing. The committee needs to call meetings as necessary to consider reports of RNs. To make recommendations to the board's program manager regarding the terms and conditions of the intervention agreement for each registered nurse participating in the program. This includes, but it's not limited to, treatment, supervision, monitoring requirements. The board's program manager may then approve or deny the recommendation made by the committee. The role is to ensure the appropriate recovery plan is in place for the RN at all stages throughout their participation in the program. The committee does have the authority to accept a participant into the program without making a recommendation to the board's program manager. The board discovered that a position known as Intervention Evaluation Consultant was created and was held by a single member of the committee. This IEC consultant individual was assigned to each applicant. So once they were accepted by the IEC and became a participant, the consultant was allowed to make decisions on a participant case without calling a meeting to vote by quorum. This is not allowable by law and needed to be eliminated immediately. With this change, it was determined that participants would then need to be seen by the IEC, which created a backlog of cases being reviewed at each IEC. The board has been trying to coordinate not only the participant scheduling, but ensuring that they are being seen with all pertinent information needed for the IEC to make an educated recommendation to the board. One example would be if a participant was requesting to be completed from the program, but the last assessment received had noted that they were not safe to practice. These cases were sent for a reassessment prior to attending their next IEC for review. Some of this information was within the statistics provided at the previous board meeting. For meeting logistics, currently there are 9 IECs that have oversight over 241 participants. On average, they meet quarterly to review cases and determine if changes are needed to the rehabilitation plan and when they need to return to the IEC. BRN has been working with Maximus to determine if case redistribution is needed to ensure that the participant to IEC ratio is appropriate, and this should help to eliminate some of the backlog of participants being seen by an IEC. We've recently run into issues with meeting locations. We've identified meeting locations in both Southern and Northern California that are DCA buildings with appropriate accommodations, meaning Wi-Fi. Some of these buildings did not have appropriate Wi-Fi, so to be able to conduct these meetings with the participants being on an online platform, it was not feasible. So we had to adjust our meeting locations for those reasons. That ends my slides for 5.0 for IEC. Committee Chair Wynn.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Could you describe for me or for us why someone might get a not safe to practice label, and then what steps they would need to do to come back into safe to practice?
From what I'm seeing initially, so per uniform standards, they have that initial diagnostic evaluation. At that time, a recommendation needs to be made on treatment, on employment, and a diagnosis. Also stating whether or not they're safe to practice. Initially, when these participants come into the program, that they're in the very early stages of recovery. And so very few do you see that they are safe to practice right when they come into the program out of the gate. So therefore, I think what they're looking for is just to have some more recovery time behind them, you know, whether they're in you know, partial hospitalization, residential program, or if it's IOP, aftercare. Once they get through that, we want them to have another assessment to state they're safe to practice so we can get them back working. However, in the past, that the not safe to practice assessment was in place. However, when they were going to the IECs, and I don't think it was being communicated that they were as not safe to practice, and therefore when they go to the IEC, that assessment I don't think was being applied when the decision was being made as to a recommendation for that participant. We found several that, and that is why we've surpassed the 50 that Maximus had mentioned, because we had several participants that had to go back and had to have another assessment done because they were found not safe to practice with nothing else in place since that statement from the assessor. So as a you know, the regulatory board, that we need, you know, to ensure they're safe. And if something says they're not, we can't, in good faith, put them out there to practice. So that has been occurring over the last several months.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Shannon. I agree with you. But so what happens is someone would come into the program and very early days, they would get an assessment. And then maybe that assessment would not be revisited for a couple of years. And then they come before the IEC and that assessment is still sitting there.
Correct.
Okay.
That has what has previously occurred. And now when we're trying to show, like, if they're not safe to practice, what is going to tell us, or where's that assessment saying they are now safe to practice? And really, as an IEC, it's not their role to diagnose. They're basically using all of the treatment information, the mental health exam, a substance abuse assessment, physical exam. They use all of the treatment information they're receiving, and all of that is what the IEC needs to look at to determine if there's something missing where they can't make a recommendation based on what they've been provided. Then the IEC needs to let us know that, hey, this information is needed. We can't make a decision, which we have seen at some IECs. They say, you know, let's push this off. They can come back at the next IEC meeting in 3 months, and by that time, we need X, Y, and Z at that time to be able to make a decision. And so that is now kind of what is occurring, instead of making decisions based on information that they do not have.
Right. So the they would be they'd be in front of the IEC, and the IEC would say, go back, get an assessment that you're safe to practice. Then who at Maximus does that assessment? Is that the caseworker that has been working with this nurse all the way through the process, or is this completely separate?
The case manager is not at that level to do a diagnosis and as far as a recommendation on diagnosis and treatment plan. That would need to be an assessor, and that is someone that is obtained by Maximus to do those. So once the participant leaves their meeting, the IEC makes the discussion or has their discussion points and rationale, they vote, and then that vote is then given to the case manager at Maximus to then follow through with the participant on what is needed prior to their next meeting.
Thank you, Shannon. One more question, a follow-up again. Are those assessments being done in a timely manner, or is there a backlog?
Well, it depends on which assessments. If you're talking about the initial assessments, they
No,
are
I'm more
getting done
talking about,
timely.
I had a meeting in
But
front
the
of my
reassessment.
IEC. I was told I had, I had to be reassessed. I was delayed, now I'm delayed 3 months. Can they get that assessment done within 3 months?
Yeah, similar to, for instance, our 820 exams. So we have to order those as well, a psych mental health eval, and we're able, and as you know, with probation, they only have 45 days to get their physical and mental health assessments done. So I think 3 months is doable.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open it up to committee members for questions or comments. Go ahead, Ms. Cormack.
Thank you, Chair Wynn, and thank you, Ms. Johnson. I guess rather than asking sort of specific questions, we get a lot of metrics in our regular board meetings, sort of at the back, and they relate to number of days probation cases have taken to go to, the administrative law judge, et cetera, et cetera. And we always struggle a little bit with those metrics. How do we know how we're doing? Now, thankfully, you all are showing more changes over time. That's helpful. I wonder, as I look at this, all the specifics under this item 5.0 that we were asking questions about, if there are similar metrics, again, that would not provide any confidential information, would not reveal any confidential information, but might help us see how we're doing. So for example, average number of days since an intervention participant has been before their IEC. I don't know what the other metrics are. It's hard for me because I'm not, as close to these programs as the rest of you are, but as we've discussed so many times since December of last year, and this is super frustrating for everyone, that this is not an efficient process to have people get upset, wait for us to have a meeting, provide a public comment, us to ask you questions. Like, I'm really looking for a way to sort of short circuit that, not in an electrical sense, I'm not an engineer, but to make that shorter, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So are there metrics that you all are tracking now, whether it's, the BRN or Maximus, that help oh my gosh, we're having a problem? What are some numbers and data we can use to manage this process going forward?
So
we definitely have data. We definitely have data, and it just depends, and there's a whole lot of data. So it really depends on what are you looking for, what's the committee looking for to take to board as far as what you want to see. We can do, I also ran some numbers from the time of intake until they were first seen by an IEC for formal acceptance into the program. We could run intake until the time of their initial assessment. There's many milestones that we can that we track, that we can share. There's absolutely tons of data.
Another might be, like last time we had verbally shared with us the number of, or maybe it was written down, the number of participants in each sort of tranche, like first year of the program, second year, third year, more than 3 years.
Right.
I think those and seeing changes in those are going to help us. And I realize that this, I can sense, even though people are otherwhere in the state, the frustration of people listening, that won't help me. I understand that, but we have to do two things at a time. This time, we have to take care of the problems we're seeing, and we have to figure out how to not have them or other ones, occur in the future. So at this moment, because we're not able, because EEO Melby is already working on, fixing the problems that people today have, and that is obviously, incredibly important. But we cannot lose sight of the fact that we also have to, understand what's happening and prevent earlier in the process whatever it is that's going to happen next. Okay, so those I have a high level of I trust our staff to offer us 3 or 4 or 5 metrics going forward on a regular basis. I would expect to see them in our regular, meetings so we can ask questions. And then I would expect us as a board and the public to say, hey, that's helpful, but it would be better if you had this one. So I don't view us, I'm not able today to say exactly what are the 5 things I want to look at, but in the same way that over the past year, we've shown more and asked more questions, I think that will get better. So those were some of the metrics I'd be interested in. And then I just want to, say something that is a version of what we talked about at our last full board meeting, which is that it is completely understandable that participants feel like the rules have been changed, because it sounds like there were some things that have been changed, right? I just listened to what you said, Ms. Johnson. IEC members had exceeded the number of terms they could serve. They were substituting on IECs not appointed to. Bagley-Keene, which is the cornerstone of, our public process, was not being followed. Individuals on IECs were making decisions, not the entire group. Not all information was available to the IEC, and that some participants were completed without a formal assessment of being safe to work. So those are a lot of changes. And then of course there's the separate amount of and we went through this, and I think Chair Wynn did such a great job last time in our last meeting, going we still feel like there are fingers being pointed and we cannot quite figure out what is the IEC, what is Maximus, what is the program manager, et cetera. So that we'll leave there for a moment. But I think those metrics are going to help us make sure that this program going forward doesn't get into a position like we would have seen this happen, right? In December, we would have seen hey, why are there so many more people that are in the program more than 3 years than there used to be? And we could have been on a parallel path. That's what I'm hoping will help us going forward in this area. I do remember asking the very first time I voted on IECs if they are interviewed by the board members, and the answer is no. That we receive a paper application, and that's confidential, and we receive it, and so we have information when we take our votes. Ms. Johnson, there was a comment in the minutes, which I earlier abstained from but had read, that indicated that conflict of interest was not entirely clear on the form, and that you said that would be taken care of. Has that been fixed for the IEC applications?
I'll need to check on that, but I know that we did discuss it, so I'll need to check to see if that was addressed. We do look at each individual applicant, though, to ensure that there's not a conflict of interest. Especially because we do have quite a bit of applicants that are coming from successful completions from the program. So we just need to be careful that we don't have conflict of interest if they're voting on cases that they have relationships with, because of, they're in their support groups together. They have these relationships that have been built over years. So we look at those to ensure that we're not going to have that, because once they go into a meeting, if there is that conflict of interest and it's a group of individuals from their meeting, they would have to recuse themselves from the discussion and voting on every single one of those cases, not to mention the availability of data on those individuals that they would have access to in the Maximus portal.
Okay, and I think Board Member Lawler touched on this last time. What is the IECs are under the purview of your organization, Ms. Johnson? Is that where they are?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Intervention has always been under the enforcement umbrella.
Okay. And are there any things, separate from all the things we're talking about today, or I guess in addition, are there process improvements or, policy considerations? If we just step back from the current, crisis for a moment, are there things that you are hoping the IECs will evolve towards? Are there improvements we should be thinking about making?
Well, I think first and foremost is there's a lot of issue with the regulation currently. There's a lot of loopholes. There's a lot of contradiction between uniform standards and regulation. So we want to get that cleared up, and that's why we came before the board several months ago to request approval to begin that regulation package for intervention. So we're working on that. There are identified areas, and we continue to be with Maximus at least weekly, it seems like, on calls to discuss certain areas and aspects of the program, and where we need to kind of identify. And there's quite a few areas, and so to try and get to all of them right now, we are trying. We've handled a lot of them, like the IEC issue. You know, for instance, we had someone, they were in their 9th 4-year term. So, I mean, it wasn't just 1 year, one term past their 4-year term. So, and then, you know, just the laws not being followed. So we're making sure that we adhere to that, and that the IECs are adhering to that. Moving forward, there, you know, we have the you know, RFP coming up because this contract ends at the end of December. So, you know, we could possibly address some areas in that as well.
Okay, well, I think, you know, it would make sense, you know, whether probably for this committee, maybe 6 months from now to get, you know, again, not trying to add work, just trying to make sure we level up, we step back for a minute and take a look at the whole program and figure out, you know, is this the right way to go? I don't mean this is the right way to go, meaning like, are there things we could do that aren't just make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing correctly, but is there more that would be helpful? And then how confident are we that the IECs operate consistently, right? That if you're seen by 6 or 7 or 1 or 4, that, you know, it's a similar experience. I'm in almost every IEC meeting, and just, you know, listening to the discussion rationale, I think they are more consistent now with covering every point of the program for each individual. For example, a year and a half ago, someone could go before the IEC. Not only would they be granted certain things without being safe to practice, but, you know, the IECs were not looking at the uniform standards. They were not applying criteria. And so now all of them, and that's, we've provided them with all of those tools. We reference them during meetings. So they are all following now the statute, regulations, uniform standards. So I can say now consistently, yes, they are following those. Of course, they're all individuals, so their rationale and discussion points are going to be slightly different. But I do, you know, they do have very, very good discussion on these cases. Okay, thank you so much.
Go ahead, Board Member Lawler. Do you have questions or comments?
Thank you. I just actually have one, because most of what we've heard, have heard before. We know, and I appreciate, Shannon, your awareness now of the systems management failure that's being addressed. It's a two-part question actually, based on the comments, and I didn't get a chance to ask it at the board meeting, but it's relevant to this agenda item. Do you know if the IECs were ever given a directive to specifically prolong or extend the program for licensees? And I asked that based on the surprise new requirements levied on many of the public commenters. Was that a directive given to the IECs, please prolong these programs?
Absolutely not. The direction given to IECs is that if you're going to complete someone, you need to make sure that they meet the criteria in Uniform Standard number 12. To go back to full-time employment, you need to make sure they meet the criteria in Uniform Standard 11. testing. You need to meet the criteria for Uniform Standard 4. We have those documents available for the IECs during each meeting, and I have them reference those criteria so they can have discussion on that. But the board does not interject in IEC committee discussion, only to give them factual information on the case that maybe they are not taking into consideration or that they've missed.
Thank you for that. And the last part of that same question is an idea about Maximus. Is it true that the vendor profits when a program is extended? Does that make any difference to them?
So to the vendor. So if they're extended, well, I mean, yes, because the vendor does still get paid, but because we're paying that administrative fee per participant per month. But the vendor has never dictated they need to be extended or gave IEC any direction to extend a participant. Maximus is also at those meetings, and neither of us are to interject in any committee discussion, rationale, or voting for those members.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, committee members, for your great questions. Before we open up for public comment, I have just two more quick questions. One is, Shannon, could you tell us what makes someone unsafe to practice, and how does that compare to people on probation? Is it the same assessment, generally speaking, or are there differences?
Well, one of the big differences in that aspect for probation, we do not consider probation unless they meet rehabilitation criteria within disciplinary guidelines. There's a list of items we have to take into consideration. So if they're newly in recovery, they're not going to be set up to be successful in probation. We need to know that they have some rehabilitation behind them, that they've already been taking steps to rehabilitate, whether it was through a criminal court order, whether it was on their own. But normally a probationer, when offered probation or the proposed decision by an ALJ is probation, it's usually because they can provide proof of some rehabilitation. If they choose to go into intervention, some might be not even had entered any sort of treatment yet. Some have not. They're in different, levels of treatment at that time. So if you just used yesterday and your intake and your assessment is today, you're probably not going to be safe to return to an RN position in patient care or with access. So, that's for the assessor to determine when they do their complete review of these individuals that want to be in the program. So, it's various reasons, but normally it's because they're still within, the very early stages of recovery. A lot of them don't want to go back to work immediately. They know that they probably can't. There's stressors and triggers, that are attached to that. So for some of them, it's, staying abstinent, really getting into their recovery, their meetings, treatment, medications for treatment, et cetera.
Thank you. And then I just had one more quick question about relapses. Again, we all know that relapse is part of, a treatment plan. It happens, it's part of the disease. And a lot of people succeed in spite of having relapses along the way. Are relapses in the intervention program treated kind of the way they are in the probation program? In other words, if someone has a series of relapses in probation, we all know from reading the cases, their probation, monitor meets with them, and they might be extended a year, or, there are lots of different ways of addressing that. Could you tell us a little bit about how that happens in the intervention program?
Yeah, so I'll just say for probation, if they have a positive test, there's no question that's a major violation, and it needs to go back to the Attorney General's office. That's how the law's read, and so we send them back. And they can either end up in probation by settling again, but usually with a positive drug screen, that's a little bit more on the severe side. And if they were working, not working, anything surrounding the circumstances of that test. In intervention, if it's a relapse, I mean, they've been going before the IEC to make a determination, you know, is this, because within uniform standards, it states minor violations and major violations and what those consequences are for those. And so even though something might be a minor violation, it could turn into a major violation if there's multiple minors. That is up to the IEC to determine. So they need to take all of that into consideration and determine, okay, is this a relapse? Yes or no? If it, you know, and then if it's a relapse, where do we go from here? Some have been terminated. Some have been kept in the program. So it really depends on the individual and the circumstances.
Okay, thank you. I think at this point, we'll open it up for public comment and
Real
we'll
quick,
take.
Tricia.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So a couple things here that I wanted to make sure that kind of highlighted and looked at is Allison, sorry, committee member Cormac, when you were wanting some kind of details and some data presented, Maximus gives a report. I believe it's a monthly report. Is that correct, Jenny? A monthly report that has a bunch of stats. What we can do is look at maybe creating a dashboard for our website, or just making, and additionally, making sure that we have something coming to our board. We don't typically share stats out at committee because we want to do a lot of the work of the committee. We do share it out for board. Are you wanting that brought forward to committee as well, or just have data pertinent to the agenda items and then have the full report to the board?
The latter. The latter.
Okay.
I think that, you know, it's not necessary, I think, for us to get it on a monthly basis. Certainly you're all reviewing it, but if it's part of, you know, if it's sort of integrated to the other metrics that we look at to evaluate the, you know, the licensing restriction portion of what the board does, then I think that's the right place for it. And that cadence is certainly fine from my perspective, quarterly, knowing that you all are taking a look at it. Again, if we learn something different, we can pivot from there.
Thank you. And then I have a timeline that I'm creating as I'm going through the audit. I did notice that with the contract, there is very specific turnaround. One of them says like intake interview within 10 business days of application, notifying the program 1 business day of scheduling the applicant, getting the application packet back within 5 days and then 10 days back. If they fail to return, then various notices are go out. The in-person clinical assessment needs to be completed within 30 days, and that is arranged by the CCM within 50 miles of the applicant's address of record or place of employment unless it's waived. They then have to have a final written report to the board no later than 10 days from the date of the assessment, unless the assessor requests additional information, but cannot exceed 20 days. So there's very strict thing, and I will get that put together to be presented at the board as well, a very clear timeline. And I think that would be helpful to have on our web as well. It is contained within Maximus's information that they give the participant. So the participant has all of these expectations laid out, but again, more data out there and making that clear would be a good thing, I think, going forward with that. The other on that in-person clinical assessment, and I know that Tricia had asked a question on that, what is in that final report to the board no later than 10 days from the assessment and cannot exceed 20 days is the summary of opinion, whether they have a substance abuse or mental illness, whether on treatment recommendations, and a must, which is I highlighted in yellow, must include practice restrictions and if the participant is safe to practice. So that is where that assessment comes from immediately within the first 30-day clinical assessment. What was discussed kind of here in this agenda item was that when it goes to IEC, and that assessment stands at they're not safe to practice, then that IEC recommends them going out for a reassessment. What I'm looking at in, I'm going to talk with the other boards and bureaus under the same contract, is if that's something that can be preemptively looked at maybe the 60-day mark or the 90-day mark, running a report, finding out who still has a not safe to practice and getting that fixed before going to IEC. Because you don't want that delay to be another 3 months, right? They need to get back to work. They need to be working. There was another area of the contract, and for the board meeting, we will be posting the current Maximus contract on the meeting materials. And so we did kind of talk about that. And we'll get that posted and up for everybody to see. That is a public document, so it's not a confidential document once the contract is out there. And one of the statements on that, it said not everybody may, it wasn't a shall or a must, that they have to stop working. So if within that first 30 days assessment, if they get that and they say that they are safe to practice, then they can practice. And so that's something that I need to look at as well as part of that deep dive to say, are we getting any that are saying they're safe to practice? Are all of them stating they're not safe to practice? What's that ratio? If they are said safe to practice, are they immediately going back to work? And I want to get that kind of data out there as well, and make sure that that path is very clear, because if people are safe to return to practice, we would like them to be practicing immediately. And so we'll kind of get that information for you as well. Any questions or anything else that I needed before we go to public comment? And I'm sure we'll get more asks during public comment that I'll wrap up at the end, just to make sure that I have everything.
Actually,
go ahead.
This is Board Member Cormack. That just triggered a thought for me, EO Milby. One of the things we haven't talked about is that often we're comparing and contrasting intervention and probation, but it appears to me that often probation is happening later in a person's process. So they have probably gone through, often, sometimes, occasionally, pick your word, gone through the criminal probation system, and they have already begun treatment. In many cases, right? So we see that, when people are going on probation, it's sort of later in the process. So I don't really have any, action item with respect to that, but I think that's probably one reason, people may be feeling like I'm not getting it, I'm being suspended, I'm being called not safe to work. That does happen in probation. It's just usually happened before we get to the discipline part of the process that has many of the same restrictions. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
And I'll be sure to take a look at that too and see if we can find any correlation. And if there is something we can say, typically in probation, this is where they start, where we can make a statement to you that typically in intervention, this is where they start. So we'll take a look at that as well.
Well, thank you both very much. That was a good kind of back and forth. I was going to open it up for public comment, but I have just realized that it's 3 minutes till noon, and I'm wondering if this would be a smart time to take a break. And I'm wondering if we could limit it to maybe 30 minutes, although I'm open if people want a little bit longer than that, and then go directly into public comment when we return. Is there a preference?
No preference from me, whatever you want to do.
Well, I just think because we have so much public comment, I'd like to break for half an hour. We'll come back at 12:30. We'll go immediately into public comment at that point. Okay, thank you all very much. See you in half an hour.